Hi, welcome to Ultimate Wildlife Gardens. My name's Chris Caligari. Now don't switch off yet. I know, immediately you'll be thinking, hello, wrinkly old guy, talking about a plant I'm not terribly interested in. But I think I might be able to change your mind. In fact, I'm convinced I will. I may not go viral on this, but I think you'll find that it's interesting. For those of you that haven't grown nettles in your wildlife garden, or indeed in your ordinary garden, I'm going to recommend it. I know they've got negatives. None of us like getting stung. I hate getting stung by these little fellas. But it's easy to avoid. I'll tell you how. You don't have to wear a suit of armour. There are ways that you can avoid getting stung. Secondly, nettles. Oh, invasive. I can also tell you, foolproof, guaranteed, how to stop them being invasive and stop them being a problem. Now, some of you subscribers already know about the benefits of nettles, but for you, I think I might have one or two things that may be useful and I can add in that you might not know. Those of you that don't grow nettles, by the end of this video, I think you'll be convinced that it'd be a damn good idea. Let's give it a shot anyway. Okay, if I mention nettles, most people will have an idea that if you want butterflies like small tortoiseshells, peacock, red admiral, comma, gorgeous butterflies, if you want them in your garden, it's a good idea to put nectar-rich flowers which they can access, buddleia being a fine example. But if you really want to help those species, you really must have the food plant of their caterpillars. No nettles, those species cannot live, and often in quite short supply. Okay, I'm stating the obvious. A lot of people know that. I'd go as far as to say most people are already aware of that. Now I'm going to go on to advantages which aren't so obvious and really which put the butterflies into, they pale them into insignificance, because nettles are far, far, far more important than just those relatively few species of wonderful butterflies that rely on them. Can we touch on moths? There are quite a few moth species. I'm no moth expert. I have difficulty identifying even the most common, but there are several moth species which we don't really notice, but the nettles are essential for a food plant for them. If you clear a patch of nettles, which I've often done in my capacity as a landscaper and various times in my life, you'll be amazed how many moths come out. One particular species are tiger moths. Some of the species of tiger moths, their caterpillars feed on nettles. But frequently you'll find things like red underwings, orange underwings, all sorts of moths that I can't name, flying out. Some are using the nettles for food plants for their caterpillars, but a lot just use it as a means of protection. It's a good, safe place in which to hide. Okay, so we dealt with butterflies, very obvious. Moths, fairly obvious. As we go on, will become perhaps less obvious, but nonetheless vitally important. Have you ever noticed how many ladybirds you see on nettles? They're frequently present in very large numbers. And that's because there are lots of aphids that feed on nettles, green fly in other words. Now, don't throw your hands up and say, we don't want aphids in our garden. There are over 500 species of aphids in this country. I'm talking Great Britain, but in wherever you come from, there are stacks of species of aphids, and each species of aphid has a very limited number of range of plants on which it can feed to act as a host. So therefore, the aphids on the nettle thrives perfectly well with them. They're very unlikely to be the same aphids which are going to infect your garden. So the aphid presence is totally harmless. But here's the ecological bit. I'm sure it's obvious to you that if you've got aphids in your natural bits of garden or your wildlife area, you're going to have stacks of natural enemies which are feeding on them. And that's going to benefit your garden. So we have lots of aphids, which are great as a food source for a wide range of animals. We're starting a very nice food chain, which is not going to affect you, not going to affect the nettles. Everybody's happy. So great benefit there. The very last season, a lot of people, neighbours that I spoke to, were having big problems with aphids on their beans particularly, but on various plants. Now I promise you, I kid you not, I had no problem in my garden. I can't offer you scientific evidence, but on my broad beans, for example, they were spring planted. I'd expect a lot of black fly on there. There were virtually zero. Now I put that down to the natural balance I've got in my garden, in that I have stacks of aphid predators already on the scene in big numbers. And that's what you want, because the natural predator-prey relationship means that as the prey numbers go up, gradually the predator numbers will follow and also climb. Now that means there's a delay, but if I already have the natural enemies, the predators of the aphids, in my environment in huge numbers, the aphids in my garden are going to get clobbered as soon as they appear. Also, we have many spiders that live in nettle patches. They need something to feed on. They'll be feeding on the insects which are feeding on the nettles. Maybe the microphone is picking up. I'm very fortunate that I have a song thrush probably nesting nearby, and it's on a post behind the camera which is singing at this very moment. I do hope the camera's picking that up. There are lots of sounds going on. You might be able to hear some of them. If you look at your nettle patch from time to time, which is well worth doing because there's always something fascinating going on, you'll often see curled up leaves. Now this is sometimes caterpillars hiding in there in a safe, secluded place, or pupating even, if I can get the words out. But frequently it's actually spiders, and the nettles form a really great place for encouraging spiders, all part of our biodiversity. Many species. As far as I know, there's no direct feeding link, but as a site in which animals can live, it is hugely important. Even when I cut last year, I found a snake skin, a calf snake skin, over the other side actually. I've got a nettle patch over there, quite extensive. I had no idea that the grass snakes were resident in there, but obviously it's a safe place. And that brings me to the other vital thing. A lot of the value of nettles lies in the fact that if we go near them, in fact we tend not to go near them because we don't want to get stung. Many animals use that same quality to keep themselves safe. So although many animals don't directly feed on the nettles, they use it for protection. And so it's immensely valuable. If you watch dogs, cats and foxes, frequently they will not go into the nettle bed. And many small mammals, lots of potential prey species use that fact because it offers a safe haven for animals. Again, another hugely beneficial role for nettles. Just the fact that we don't like going in them, other things don't like going into nettle beds, and so it's a protective, safe haven. Terrific for wildlife. Just what we want. So I hope, I haven't exaggerated, I hope I've given a convincing argument why nettles are so important and vital for our wildlife, in our gardens, in our wildlife areas wherever you can include them. Okay, let's deal with the next thing. Oh, they're terribly invasive. Good point. They are, or at least they can be, but they're dead easy to manage. If you have a space which you think will be suitable for nettles, then choose it carefully and you'll have no problem. You can put up a physical barrier in the soil to stop the roots from spreading, slabs on end, corrugated iron, something like that. But personally I've never done it because they're so easy to manage simply with the use of a mower. If you can mow a foot or two around the nettle bed, they will not stand mowing and they will not move across that boundary. It is an absolute fact that you can easily contain them by mowing around and keeping it fairly closely mowed around your nettle patch. Okay, management point 2, practically speaking, I know because I've done it for donkey's years, as my wrinkles show, but it's very simple to avoid getting stung. And you don't have to wear, as I said, a suit of armour. Sensible precautions, but really you don't need to go near them. So what I do is nettles towards the edge of my mowed area. I just get a pair of clippers, just cut the height off them, because what tends to happen is when you're mowing, it's very easy, if as I am at the moment, you've got bare arms, a nettle will flop against you and sting. Now I hate getting stung by nettles, so I avoid it, but I always have nettles in my wildlife area. Just a little tip here in consideration, the nettles are for wildlife, so we don't harm the wildlife. So once I cut the nettles off, I'll leave them lying on the ground because there might be caterpillars, there might be some other animals in there which might be able to escape. I'll leave them for a day or two before I pick them up, close to the nettles which are uncut. Just a precaution, but for the sake of it, why not? I also don't get stung by nettles because I like to think I'm half sensible. So I don't have to go in there when I'm mowing or close to them. I don't have to get stung then. I don't ever really actually go into the nettle patch. That's partly because I don't want to get stung. Okay, stated the obvious, duh. But also because that nettle patch, the value of it is undisturbed. And if I walk through it, I'm creating a pathway. And I know very well from years past experience that a dog or a cat or something, where I've beaten the nettles down, is going to follow in. We've created a little path. So I like to keep it completely intact and don't disturb it. I'll walk around it, I'll look for signs of wildlife and whatever, but I won't actually go into the nettle patch. Okay, little tip. You've got your nettle patch, you want to see what's going on in your nettle patch, you want to see that you're doing some good, just out of interest apart from anything else. If you've got your nettle patch, you will be doing some good. Fact. But I frequently don't actually look for animals on the nettles. Obviously I'll hope to see some, but usually it's easier to look for signs. So I look, even if I'm looking for caterpillars, I don't necessarily look directly for the caterpillars. My eyes will be focused on areas of nettles which have been damaged, eaten, nibbled. That's a good clue that there's something there. Even if I don't actually find that animal, I can see that there's something, probably a caterpillar, eating that. Great. That's going to be food for bats, it's going to be food for tits, it's going to be something along the food chain. Very, very valuable. Also, I look for leaves which have been curled over. I'll know that there's something living in there, quite like a spider's nest, or a moth perhaps, forming a chrysalis in there. Sometimes also, if it hasn't been too much rain, and not too windy, it's also quite useful, little tip, to look for the droppings of caterpillars. These little black looking specks, which frequently, if there are big caterpillars around, you'll see on the leaves, and it's often a good telltale sign, and I know to look a little bit further there. So often you can find the signs of living things in there, but you can take it from me, gospel, if you have a nettle bed, there are stacks of living things that will live in there. You're doing a huge amount for biodiversity. One other little mention I'll give you, which is useful to know, on the management front, apart from shortening at the edges so they don't flop onto me, the mower, the pedestrian walking along the path by the side of them, is if you cut some of them, this is my recommendation, if you cut some of them back, about June, July, cut them right back to the ground, this will produce a new flush of nettles, and for later broods of caterpillars, they like the young nettles, and often if you leave them with the old flowering heads on and they're tough, they're quite discriminating, and they will avoid those and they'll go for the young nettles. Having cut them, again I will leave the nettles close to the ones I haven't cut, just in case I've got caterpillars or some other creatures, so they can escape and go into the living nettles. That way you keep them in good condition for the later brood. I wouldn't personally cut the whole patch, because there are lots of creatures in there that are relying on your nettles for protection, and it's only some species that are going to benefit from the new ones, from the new nettles coming up. Okay, maybe, I hope, if you're not already well aware of the benefits of nettles, I hope maybe you might be softening towards the idea of having some nettles. If you do want nettles, they're dead easy to propagate. You don't have to go and dig any up, but you can do that. Dig up a few roots. Obviously they'll take quite easily. But if you wish, pheasant calling, if you cut off some healthy youngish shoots, about something like that, foot long, and just stand them with your gloves on in a jar of water, they'll usually root. Once they've rooted, you can plant them out. You might want to grow them on in a pot just to make sure they're established, but they'll basically go from there. Dead easy to find, dead easy to grow. Where are you going to grow them? Well, you might grow them in an odd corner where you don't necessarily need it for anything else. Okay, of benefit, great, useful. But if you want to attract butterflies to lay their eggs in there, they're a little bit choosy, and they prefer your nettles, which are in good condition, in a nice sunny position. So plant them in the shade of something. They might well grow okay, and they'll be great for a lot of wildlife, but for your butterflies, your best chance of getting some nice caterpillars of red admirals or something is to plant them in a nice sunny open position. I did mention a hedge back then. It's probably as well, if you want to keep them contained, to plant away from a hedge so that you can mow between the hedge and your nettle bed, because otherwise they will spread in there and then you will have a bit of a problem. They don't like a lot of shade, so it probably won't be too much a problem, but you want to contain them. Having sold the idea that they're quite easy to contain, you obviously must bear that in mind. Okay, I've got a final tip which might be useful for some. There's a normal stinging nettle like this one is Urtica dioica, by far the most common. But also there is a species, Dioica urens, which grows much smaller, and it's an annual nettle, and that can be very useful. I am told, I haven't got first-hand experience because I've got none here that I know of, that the most species of caterpillars are perfectly happy to grow on that as well. So it is an annual species, doesn't grow so high, and it could be useful. On this channel I try and be as complete and comprehensive as I can. I've heard mention that these Urtica urens, the annual nettles, aren't native. They're certainly native to a lot of Europe and North America, I believe, and I've commonly seen them growing in wild and semi-wild situations. But I have seen somewhere on the internet saying that they're not native, and I'm very careful about not encouraging foreign, non-native species. So word of caution, I don't think it will be any problem. I think they're pretty well naturalised. I don't think they're terribly invasive. But in fairness, I have got to mention that. But I'm saying that they could be a useful alternative in a smaller garden perhaps. Right, last but not least, can I mention the comments? You can always leave a comment down below, and I always read all of the comments, good, bad, whatever, and so I'm always pleased to hear from you. Especially, I love to hear about what you've done and the successes you've had. So please feel free to comment, and I will respond as and well I can. But you can absolutely guarantee that I always see them. Okay, that about wraps up my nettles. They're not the most beautiful plant, but we've dealt with avoiding getting stung, with the benefits, the huge benefits to wildlife. I hope that if you haven't got them now, you'll seriously consider it and plant them in your garden. It just remains for me to say I'd be most grateful if you would press the thumbs up, like on this video. It helps me, it helps the channel. I'd be extremely grateful if you would share this video with those that you think would be interested, or those that perhaps might be tempted to go along this ecological line that we take on this channel. But if you would subscribe, that would be extremely useful, and I'd be undyingly grateful to you for that. Most of all, thanks ever so much for watching this wrinkly old guy prattling on. I hope you found it useful, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much. Bye.